I'm so happy today to have Ed Diehl here, a state representative. Am I saying
You
that
got
right?
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was confused like congressional and state, but thanks for coming here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
And Shelly is here to co-host. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a while, but so welcome
Yeah,
back. Yeah.
thank you.
um, yeah, I just want to get started. Like, tell me about your district. I don't know much about it down there. I'm
Yeah.
a Portland boy up here, but yeah, tell me about that and how you got to your current position there. And
Yeah. So I serve House District 17. So that covers a big chunk of unincorporated East Salem and then all the way up through the canyon. So the towns of Turner and Almsville, State and Sublimity, and then Lyons, Mill City, Gates, Mahama, Detroit, and Idana.
okay,
So that Highway 22 corridor.
okay.
That's
I
my
say
that's my turf.
did you say Lebanon? I can't remember.
No,
Okay,
no,
not Lebanon.
Lebanon south of us.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
I have spent time in there. I shot a video there once, but that's a
Yeah.
different story. But yeah, that's a
And then
cool area.
it also covers a chunk of Scio, which is where I live in Linn County.
Okay,
But most of it's Marion County.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and tell me about your kind of rise to power. I don't want
Rise
to make
to
it
power.
too dramatic.
I don't feel
but,
like I'm in power, but
I know there's,
no,
we're talking about, I don't know, 20, 30,000 people. I don't know how many people are down there.
no,
So,
I think it's about
okay.
57,000 people. Every district is the same size as far as the population. That's why they go through this
Okay.
redistricting every 10 years.
I see.
So, and yeah, what happened is they redistricted.
Mhm.
So the the two reps that covered the area, the territory of my district, were carved out of it.
Mm.
So Rep. Jamie Kate, who does live around in the Lebanon area, she had the Santiam Canyon. They districted her out of that.
Mm.
And then Turner and Almsville were part of this other Salem district, and Raquel Moore Green represented that. Well, they carved her out too.
Mm.
So it created this new district that had no representation.
Mm.
And I had retired from my business. I'm an engineer by degree. I had a factory automation and controls business based in Albany. We worked all over the place,
Okay.
all over the country and the world. And I'd sold that about 5 years ago. And so I was doing nonprofit work. And I just, there's a number of reasons we can talk about if you want, but I decided to get in. And my wife and I both prayed on it and said, well, this is an opportunity. If I don't try, I'm going to regret it.
Yeah.
I'll always think back, what if? So we gave it a shot, and we had a primary opponent who declared in October, and I didn't decide to run until right after Christmas.
Okay.
And then, but we hit it hard, and we won the primary, and there was no Democrat that filed.
Right.
So I actually won the write-in for the Democrat nomination.
Okay.
So I was a
Interesting, yeah.
Republican and a Democrat for my district.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't even know you could even
I
do
was,
that, I guess, yeah.
I saw, wow, I got a lot of write-ins, And then I get the letter from the Secretary of State. Do you want to accept the nomination for the Democratic? And at first I thought, well, I'm not a Democrat.
Yeah.
But I thought people went out of their way
Right.
to
Yeah.
write my name in. I'm going to honor that, and I will accept this nomination. And so,
That
yeah,
is kind of cool.
it
Yeah.
confused a few people.
Yeah.
So I had a little thing. What's a Republican Democrat anyway?
Yeah.
And to explain.
Well, now
the
I'm wondering, like,
process.
is there even more? Can you be like the winner of like Republican, Democrat, Independent, like all these
Working
theoretically?
family.
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know how it applies with the Independent Party, because that
Yeah.
is a party in Oregon.
Right.
Um,
But like,
but
if
it
people
could
wrote
be.
you in, that's
If
possible.
people wrote me in, yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
That's cool. I didn't even know that it's like possibilities. That's cool. Very cool. Yeah, I did want to ask you because I'm curious about your engineering background, and I'm
Yeah.
kind of just like a tech nerd. I don't know.
Oh,
So I'm
okay.
curious.
Yeah, I'm a tech nerd too.
Yeah.
So
Your background seemed cool. I don't know. Yeah.
So I'm mechanical engineer is my degree. I have a bachelor's and master's. And I went to Stanford. That's where I met my wife, by the way. But my master's was focused on what was called at the time smart product design. So it was taking computers and software and making machines do things.
Okay.
And so my business was called Concept Systems, but we we did factory automation and control systems.
Mm-hmm.
So we would go into factories and put the computer systems on the machines. And typically those machines had an operator or operators of some kind. So we do the operator interface, we do the control systems with all the sensors and actuators to make the machine do
That's
stuff.
pretty cool. And is this
And
like,
it
yeah, for injection molding or just all sorts
could
of
have
stuff? Or
injection molding. We did a lot of work in the aerospace
oh
industry.
wow, okay,
So a lot with Boeing, did a little bit of work with SpaceX.
nice.
Um, got to talk to Elon Musk once over
Really?
that. Yeah,
Wow.
That's super
he's
cool.
very involved.
Yeah.
um, and then ConAgra Foods was
Okay,
a
yeah,
great
huge.
customer.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
everything from French fries to 747s.
Nice.
Yeah,
I do have a
we
French
got
fry
involved
question later, by the way, but
in.
that's cool. That's
But
very
it was
cool.
a
Yeah,
great career, and I loved it. I love technology,
yeah.
and I love automation. So my house, I've programmed my
You
house.
have a
Runs on a
super smart
Raspberry
house.
Pi.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
yeah,
Wow. Yeah, I
yeah,
know what those are. Yeah,
yeah,
get the little tiny computer running that
yeah.
thing.
I had it
Yeah.
running on a PC. This is my third generation of home automation. I went through two
Okay.
generations, and then
It just keeps getting better.
yeah, it keeps getting better and simpler.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Well, simple for me. Sometimes it drives my wife nuts,
Is
but
that a way, yeah, too, to like you run it that way so you don't have like the Amazon or the whatever's running it, like you can control it that way? Is that kind of the
well, yeah, I use this open source software called OpenHab,
there you go. Yeah.
and so for a few $100s, I can buy the controller. The software is completely free,
That's cool.
and then
You're a legit, yeah, engineer.
That
Yeah.
is
yeah,
so cool.
then I write the code,
What?
and
Are you kidding me?
yeah, and so I don't know. It's it's a hobby.
Okay,
Okay.
so as a non-tech geek, what is something in your house like that you've automated that it would be unusual?
Um, it was probably all fairly normal stuff, but I have it all. So it's all connected to this one little Raspberry
Hmm.
Pi that fits in the palm of your hand.
Okay.
So all the lights are controlled through that.
Okay.
I have a couple water fountains. So when I come home, the water fountains will turn on. When I leave, because it's
They-
integrated with the security system.
That's cool.
So
Oh,
yeah.
very cool.
Um, the home theater, I can from my phone. In fact, right now I could press a button. I want to watch Roku.
Oh,
So the home theater, the receiver comes on, the projector comes on, the lights go to wherever they want,
very
or
cool.
wherever I
That is
set them
kind of,
at.
yeah, I did not
Yeah,
expect you to have that. Like, what do you
and
code? What do you
and the
code that in?
environmental and the thermostats are also
Temperature.
connected.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
What do you code that in? Can you-
it's like a JavaScript. It's
Okay.
a yeah, and I'm no JavaScript expert. I'm kind of a hack at it. I'm not in it every
no,
day.
yeah, I'm impressed. I couldn't do any of that. So,
Yeah, but it's fun.
yeah, very cool. Okay, I want to just kind of start with this. Actually, let me flip these around. Since we just talking tech, you're on the semiconductor committee, right?
That was a
Or
committee
in
in
the
the long
past.
session in
Yeah,
2023, and it was a special committee set up
to get that
for the state to take advantage of the Federal Chips
that
Act.
federal money.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to ask, because I've talked about on the show before a few times of like, Intel used to be, so they still have a large presence here, but
Yeah.
Oregon in my mind is kind of waning that position that it used to have. But I'm curious, like your take on.
Well, yeah, that's always a concern, but there's still things that are advantageous to us. For one, we still have this massive presence in semiconductor.
Mm-hmm.
So even though there's a lot of things against us, it's very expensive to build in Oregon. You've got all the craziness going on in Portland.
Mm-hmm.
But we're still one of the largest semiconductor forces in the world. If you look
The
regionally,
Silicon
we are,
Forest, they call it
yeah,
sometimes. Yeah.
and especially in the United States. So, and it's an attractive place for more R&D focused work.
Okay.
Not necessarily production of generic chips, although we do some of that, but most of
Research.
the like Intel, my understanding anyway, is most of their R&D is still done in Oregon.
Yeah, I don't know. It could
Yeah.
be. Yeah.
And part of that's driven by workforce.
Okay.
We have some great universities here, so they have access to a very strong workforce in Oregon. And since they already have a presence here, in some cases it's just more appealing for them to expand instead of setting up shop somewhere
Right.
else. Although they have, there's a lot of activity going on in Arizona, for example.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of semiconductor companies are moving in there.
Yeah.
But our job in the semiconductor task force was to come up with a package to make the state appealing for companies to bid to build their operations in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
So they put a bid proposal together. The whole idea is they put a bid proposal together to the federal government, say, hey, we're going to build this. We'd like to do it in Oregon. Here's what Oregon's bringing to the table. Here's what we're bringing to the table. Give us a chunk of that
Yeah.
several $billion. And
And is that I was just thinking this, is that a typical process when there's a big federal act like that or whatever? Like a committee will put together like RFP or whatever you call that and just say, hey, here's what we can offer to get this federal money.
I don't know how typical it is because this is my first rodeo
Yeah.
in the legislature.
It's all good. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think this was a big one. I mean, this is
Yeah. I know there's a lot of money available.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, it was. I can't remember how many hundreds of billions of dollars it was, and so I think Oregon. Our job was, what do we need to do to make it appealing for these companies to pick us instead of Arizona or other states? And we do have a lot of things going for us, but we wanted to make sure we invested in our education systems, because not just for producing PhDs and engineers, but skilled tradespeople
Yeah.
to work in these factories on the factory floor. So we needed to do some of that. We also needed to make sure that they had a place to build, and there was public money to help with some of the infrastructure costs, some of the system to offset some of those costs. So that's a lot of the focus was around those issues with our bill that we put together. And I think last I've heard, we attracted over $40 billion worth of federal investment
Is that
into
right?
the
Wow.
state based on the proposals that have come our way. Now,
Okay.
how many of those actually
Right.
go through, I can't tell you. I haven't kept detailed track of where that is right now, but I know at one time we were looking at over $40 billion, which was beyond what we
Really?
were
Yeah.
thinking we'd get. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds promising.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just curious about that. Okay. Let me ask you about like what's your opinion on the state of the GOP in Oregon? Because I hear all sorts of different things, and I'm just curious. Like,
Yeah.
do you view it as healthy? Like, do you like how things are going now?
We got a lot of work to do.
Okay.
We
Okay.
got a lot of work to do.
Okay.
And again, I'm coming at it from the outside. I've been a Republican.
Mhm.
I moved to the state in '89.
Okay.
I think I was a libertarian and then quickly became a Republican so I could vote in primaries, and it was more aligned with my values. And I voted, but I was never involved in any political party, none of the county GOP
Right.
events.
Activity or whatever.
And frankly, I was more focused on what was going on nationally than at the state level.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I think that's the case for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it's a mistake.
I try to point that out a lot
It's a
because I'm like,
mistake.
if you want to see changes, focus on the local
Yeah.
stuff.
Start
like,
local.
Yeah.
You have to, I'm telling people, connect the dots. What's going on the streets is directly related to who you voted for in the legislature, in the state. And a lot of people don't even know who their state representative is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It drives me crazy up here because, like, I have a lot of Portland people, and literally a lot of my, acquaintances and friends in Portland don't know any of these people.
Yeah.
They don't know who's running. They don't know who's currently elected, and it just drives me crazy. But I couldn't agree with you more.
But as far as the state GOP, my take is there's still a lot of infighting that goes on.
Mm-hmm.
And I go into the meetings and I you got to get out of your bubble.
Mm-hmm.
We're fighting a real battle in this state. And I know you don't agree with everything that this particular Republican believes and votes on and thinks, but that is small potatoes compared to the battle we have in the legislature. I'll tell them, look, I'm serving with socialists in there. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah. Literally.
Yeah, I'd much rather serve with another Republican that, man, I don't agree with him on some things, but most things I do. That's not where we should be spending our time and money. If I have $1 to spend, I'm going to go spend it in a purple district where I might have a chance to swing from a D seat to an R seat. And instead, we have Republicans that are trying to displace another Republican because they don't pass the purity test.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a waste of time and energy and money.
Yeah. I
And
was
yeah.
I was just curious, do you think that's like I always thought maybe it was just my generation, but like and younger, but like do you think that's just like an unwillingness for people to talk to other people that you don't agree with, like on any level? Like it just seems like that is such a growing problem of like if you have any slight
It,
disagreement,
yeah.
people are just like, I'm not dealing with this person or whatever.
Yeah, it's tough. There's people are really upset. And Oregon has changed, and they feel like it's kind of gotten out of their control because they don't even recognize the bills that are being passed.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get out of the Portland area, Oregon's a very conservative
Yeah,
state.
that rural urban
Yeah,
divide.
it's where I live.
Yeah.
So they don't understand kind of what has happened, and it's very frustrating. And so part of my job in my own small way is I'm trying to reach out to these different county GOP groups and say, hey, I am a conservative, but we have to understand the lay of the land here in Oregon. We're not going to get everything we want overnight. Quit the infighting. I go to these meetings and these people are passionate about the state. They're volunteering their time to help the state, and let's focus on the issues that matter to Oregonians, not just the R's, but the ones in the middle. There's a ton of them in the middle that are tired of all this fighting on both sides. What are their issues? Focus on those issues. And in most cases, in my belief and what I've seen, is they align more with my values than they do with the progressive Democrats in the legislature. It's like here's the typical Oregon voter. We've always been kind of this moderate voting bloc.
And it's funny because people don't believe that, but I always point out Tom McCall. Like, I believe he was like a very environmentally conscious Republican.
Our land use laws,
and he set up a lot of that stuff.
From that era, I believe, and those were pretty progressive land use laws. But there was a lot of bipartisan agreement at that time on that.
I would say crunchy conservatives came from Oregon. Because we care about the land around us.
We do.
Yeah, and there's this weird mentality definitely up here with progressive people that's not the case.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot of people who do care about the environment.
Really, I hear that too. And it really bothers me because the people that I grew up in a rural area, people that worked the land, worked in the woods, and I live with them in my district. They care. They care a lot.
Well, if anything, they'd care more about
They have
that
to
land.
care.
They have to. And they're not there to use and abuse the land and destroy it. They see it as this incredible resource that we have to respect and care for our generation and future generations.
Because for a lot of them, it's their livelihood, right? And,
it is their livelihood.
And it's not just their livelihood, it was their father's livelihood.
Yeah.
And it will be their children's livelihood if things change.
Right. So, but it is a different perspective. I think the perspective most conservatives have is kind of where the land is there for us to take care of and take advantage of and support our livelihoods, make good livings, make a nice place for us and our children to live. But we have to take care of it so it's there for future generations too. And I think that's maybe an old-fashioned conservationist approach.
That's the kind of word that
preservationist, which is today has taken over. And in many cases, I think it's just misguided.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, it is. I don't know. It is really interesting because I think people like conflate a lot of this stuff. They think that people on the right look at like plastic or paper straws and kind of conflate all these issues. But that's, like I said, I've met a lot of people in Oregon who are on the right and care deeply about the environment. And
Yeah.
I don't know, you wouldn't know that just talking to people in Portland, but
I really care about the environment not burning completely to bits like it did
Yeah.
in
You know,
2020.
my district, and it's one of the reasons I'm in the legislature, is the Labor Day fires from 2020 burned tens of thousands of acres of my district, burned 700 homes,
wow.
took multiple lives in the canyon. And it didn't have to be. It didn't have to be for a number of reasons. One was Governor Kate Brown had an opportunity to put out the wildfires that started
Kind of early on.
and made decisions. Our government made decisions not to let those fires burn.
Did they? I don't know if this question has ever been answered. I lived between both of the big fires. My home was in an
Yeah.
evacuation zone and the fire out of Blue River, and then my business was in Lebanon, and I was almost lost my business in September
Oh, wow.
because people weren't, leaving their homes. But I had heard that the fire had been burning for quite a while. Has anybody ever explained what the reasoning was behind not putting that fire out
Well,
immediately?
my understanding, it was in a wilderness area.
Hmm.
And so the federal government philosophy is to just let those burn. We had a chance, and it was in an area that I think was difficult to access. We could have dumped retardant on it. It was
They
it,
have
it was
plans
12
for that.
acres. I know, but it was in a wilderness area. And then, so the philosophy, if you're going to dump retardant in a wilderness area, that's going to be harmful. So, but just terrible decision making.
In the thinking, yeah.
And I fought fire as a kid.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When I graduated from high school, that was my summer job, to fight fire.
Oh, wow.
And make some money to go to college. And I did that, I think, 2 summers.
Yeah.
So it's something I'm somewhat familiar with.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, I was thinking is the thinking there, if it's a wilderness area, it's just too treacherous to even get in there and kind of.
It's not the treachery. It's the philosophy of a wilderness area, leave it.
Wait, what?
Huh?
I did not know that. I really thought when they said, "Oh, it's in a remote wilderness area," that meant, difficult firefighting conditions. They're worried
No,
about the lives of the
there's a
firefighters.
category of land that's considered wilderness area, and so they don't log it. You leave it wild. You let it be, is the philosophy. And
it's kind of like Vegas, like whatever happens in there
just stays there. Except for it doesn't.
But that philosophy has taken over at the federal level with our federal forest lands. And so and now it's happening with the Habitat Conservation Plan more and more on the state level. So we have these massive tracts of forest land. We have, I think, more trees now than we had 100 years ago in Oregon.
Wow.
But we have massive tracts of forest that are really not being what we call actively managed. So you go in and you sustainably harvest, you reduce the fuel load in those forests. And by fuel load, I mean what's going to burn if there's a fire.
Okay.
It's not just trees. That's
right.
It's all the underbrush and
growing,
everything.
Yeah.
And if you don't manage that, when a fire does hit, it gets really hot. A healthy managed forest can survive a fire. It burns on the ground. It doesn't crown the trees. It's not killing the trees. Those fires are actually healthy for a forest because the conifers actually, that's how they need that heat to
yeah. Well, but what you're saying makes sense though. Like, yeah, because I heard that a lot when fire was going on recently. Of like, yeah, if you don't properly manage those areas, like it's just more explosive. It's more of a tinderbox.
Absolutely.
All that kind of stuff.
And that's what we saw. That where I live in the canyon, that's the heart of the spotted owl. It started in Mill City area. They came in and they shut down logging. This was back in the 80s. With
this is what I was going to ask you about, to protect the owl, right?
To protect the spotted owl. That was the theory. We've got to protect this owl. The steps that were taken locked up hundreds of thousands of acres across the state. It took thousands of jobs. It closed a lot of sawmills down. It devastated rural communities in Oregon,
And this is
and they still haven't recovered.
a state thing or a federal thing, or
That was
That was
a
federal.
federal
okay,
thing. That was a federal thing.
okay.
And so the problem is we've been doing that for 30 years. Well, guess what? The spotted owl population is still in decline. It's been
So it
declining the whole time.
didn't fix that.
No,
Yeah.
locking up this habitat has not fixed the spotted owl situation.
And is that the decline? Is that from fires, or what is the?
No, it's from another owl.
Okay, so it's nature. Yeah.
It's nature. It's another owl, the barred owl.
Okay. It's a big ass
Very,
owl or something.
it's a
Yeah.
little bigger.
Okay.
It's more aggressive, but it's very closely related. They can mate.
Oh, wow.
There are these hybrid owls. I think they're called the sparred owl that are out there now. But the barred owl is also a predator.
Right.
It will go and kill spotted owls. It'll take their nesting spaces. And so the barred owl population, which I think came over primarily from the East Coast, it's just worked its way
Spread,
over here for a variety of reasons, is now finding that this habitat's great for it. And it is taking over the spotted owl habitat.
And yeah, they're good.
So all this effort, all those jobs lost, all the devastation that we did for these cities, taking revenue away from schools and things like that, to save this species of owl has not produced any benefit at all.
Yeah, yeah. And has there been conversation? Because is that why I saw you post about that, talking about we need to change the Endangered Species Act? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah. So I posted. So I brought this up to some people in jest. I said, I can think of a lot easier and less expensive ways to save the spotted owl besides locking up all this valuable timberland in Oregon, which also increases the risk of wildfire when we do that. And I said, we should just hire a bunch of young guys with guns and go shoot the barred owls. Well, guess what? That's what the federal government
I just
is
saw that.
proposing
Is that
to
what they're
do.
proposing, really?
Yeah. Yeah. They're
'Cause
going
that's what I
to
was
hire hunters to go and kill
Kind of like
the
permit
barred
that
owls.
to be.
Yes.
Because that's what I was thinking when you were saying they're spreading from the East Coast. They just come out and hear these owls, and they're like, "Wow, I can just feast on all these protected owls and spread my own owl population."
So now we're going to be doing this, I guess, nonstop thing to go kill another owl in favor of the spotted owl, which really tells me it's really not as adapted to this habitat as we thought. It's much more. The barred owl is.
And yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I'm not a biologist. Like, I like to write, take pictures. Biology is not my thing, but I do own animals, and animals. It seems like animals are doing what animals are doing. Like, why are we messing with nature? We're going to go in and we're going to kill these owls. Are they sure they're going to kill those owls and not accidentally kill the spotted owls? Like my uncle said.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, my uncle and my father and all my cousins all worked in the logging industry and the mill industry. And back in the 80s, and I lived in Lebanon then, so it was one of those towns devastated by the spotted owl. My uncle said, and he's been in the woods since he was a child. I see spotted owls in second growth all the time. The big thing was spotted owls are in old growth. They're only in old growth. They don't survive in second growth. And it's not true.
No.
So we continually are inserting ourselves into nature, trying to take care of man-made problems or problems that we think are problems that maybe are just a process of nature. And I wonder about, are we creating more problems than we're solving? It sure seems like it. So.
Well, yeah, we do create a lot of problems when we try and do this. And the barred owl, I mean, some people say, well, it's because of human intervention is the reason that the barred owl's over here. I've seen some other studies.
That's what I was just thinking.
That it's natural.
Okay.
So this would have occurred. Maybe it occurred a little faster than it would have without human intervention, but it was going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
And I often wonder, well, what owl was here before the spotted owl? Maybe we should try and bring that owl back. I mean, is there something magical about this particular species of owl. But part of the problem with the Endangered Species Act is it does lead to kind of silly things where we're going to do this massive killing spree of one animal uh, to save of one species of owl to save another species of
Mm.
owl. We do it with fish too. We just you experienced that in your area with
Yes.
green Peter. We killed thousands of
We destroyed spawning beds?
kokanee, I think, to save the
Yes.
Chinook
Oh,
Mm.
yeah,
because one's listed, one's not. I
the
think I have that
barometric
right.
pressure change when they
Yeah.
drained the dams to these historic low levels killed tens of thousands of fish. But what we don't know about, and what I've wondered about, and I went down where the beds are, there's spawning beds of other fish down there, and they were completely covered in,
Sediment.
half a foot of
So
sediment.
yes, and I spoke to the Army Corps about that move. This is another thing where the Endangered Species Act is basically the lawsuits are forcing the Army Corps of Engineers to figure out how to remediate the dams in the valley here
Mm.
to comply with the Endangered Species Act because they're looking at the salmon population is lower than desired. So why is that? There's a number of reasons, but one thing they've said is, well, Army Corps, you need to change the outflows of these streams. You need to uh, make it so the temperatures are different. I know in my area with the Santiam River, they've determined that the river is too cold coming out of Detroit Dam.
Yeah.
So they're putting this, I can't remember the name, but it's a blender that'll blend water from the top and water from the
Okay.
bottom
Control the
to
temperature.
maintain a temperature which is more appropriate for spawning, in
This is
theory.
kind of wild though. So this is all from the Endangered Species Act, is what you're saying?
Yes.
And that comes from, what is that, the
That's
EPA or
that.
something?
Yeah, this was passed in I think the 70s
Mhm.
under the Nixon
Yeah.
administration.
But
And
like what you're saying
yeah.
about, I'm guessing there's the federal government telling the Army Corps of Engineers to kind of do these
Not
little
the federal
changes.
government. It's
State
attorneys. So what happens
lawsuits. Okay.
so there's these lawsuits that basically these nonprofits are through courts are telling the federal government,
Mm.
the Army Corps, you will do this. And basically the Army Corps had chosen a path to do this remediation, but these nonprofits did not like that, so they sued.
Mm.
And then the courts decided what you will do. The court decision was you're going to drain for green peter. You're going to do this. You're going to drain it lower than it's been drained in ever,
Mm.
and wash all this sediment downriver. So now you've got the city of Lebanon having to deal with filtration problems, and Sweet Home.
Sweet Home had the best water in the state.
Yeah.
They have competitions and a new water system and these expensive filters, and they were going to be going to a national competition.
I didn't even know they had
I didn't
competitions.
know
That's
they did
cool though.
either.
I didn't
Yeah.
know that either.
Right? And Sweet Home won for the entire state for the quality of
And that's
water.
just river water is what you're talking about.
Well, the water comes from the river.
Or just wherever, yeah, all the water.
Yes. And once they took the dams down to that level, the water was turbid. The turbidity was very, very high. So the water went from a beautiful sort of green color to chocolate brown.
It looked like the muddy Mississippi.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was so
Or I was just thinking
shocking.
of
That's where they're pulling their drinking water for the city of Sweet Home. and
Really?
Lebanon.
Yes. Yeah. It caused, like, people were saying, why is my water colored? And the city was like, and of course, I understand why. Oh, no, your water's fine. Then nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong. And then, it became quickly clear that there was a huge problem. I know Lebanon had a huge problem as well.
I mean, was it actually, did they like test that? Was it drinkable?
So
I mean,
yes, they did. And I don't know how much you know about the testing that they did, but they have their
did.
strict tests that they have to do. And they even sent it away because they were worried about something that could have come out of the sediment. Outside of it being turbid, it was still drinkable, but it's essentially,
Yeah.
muddy water.
Yeah.
And it destroyed the filtration.
So it's
The
increased their
filters,
cost.
yeah, it massively increased the
Yeah.
costs.
And
For
for tiny towns, like they don't really have a big water
They
treatment thing or whatever.
No, and
Yeah.
the water's already expensive because they had put in a new system, and these filters are, I think, hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're very expensive.
Mm,
Um, and they did have a meeting, and what was interesting was everybody shows up in person, and then there's a screen for people to zoom in. I was trying to look up the name of the group, but there's 3 groups that did the lawfare, and they show up on Zoom to talk about why this was a good thing and sorry about your water
mm,
quality. And somebody asked, I mean, are these people going to pay for all of
mhm,
and the guy actually said, well, you're going to have to talk to the Corps of Engineers and the government. It's not our problem. We
mm.
sued for this. We got what we wanted, and you
And the
know,
whole goal was to preserve salmon. Is that what you're saying? Or, yeah.
yes.
To increase salmon population.
Yeah.
Yes. And the challenging thing, they don't even know if these efforts are going to work.
There's
And
So
do
I
they?
really
asked him, well,
tracked and
what's the end goal? What's the metric to know we succeeded? Well, we don't have one. We'll just keep looking at it for 10
just
years,
keep trying things.
20
Yeah.
years.
I
Yeah.
have looked at these groups, the environmental groups that are suing, and they state fairly clearly their goal is to get rid of dams.
Yes.
Mm,
They don't, and I think we might have talked about it. They don't care about the animals. This is my opinion. They care about tearing down these structures and other structures in place.
There's it's like this idealistic vision of the
right.
pre-colonial West, and
No dams
they're
and
yeah, no dams, no logging. They're going to restore in this whatever they have as this idealized version of what that was. Um, these groups don't want to limit logging; they want to eliminate logging,
mm,
Yes.
and they can use. There's another act um, that I'm still trying to get familiar with, but the Equal Access to Justice Act, which was established for people to, if they were not getting justice, an individual's not getting justice, or this group, they could sue the federal government to protect their rights. They could get reimbursed
hmm,
for their fees, legal fees.
okay.
That's in their in place. But the way the law was written, these environmental groups can do the same thing, can
Hmm,
take advantage of that. So we have made millionaires out of a lot of attorneys
mhm,
by this our tax dollars fund these lawsuits against the federal government
hmm,
to protect these animals and push this extreme agenda. It's all being paid for by taxpayers through because of this act that was passed, I think, in around 1990.
hmm,
And I just want to point out, many of these lawyers that are joining these firms and doing this work come out of Lewis and Clark Law School.
mm,
They are radical environmental
yeah.
lawyers.
And
Yeah.
So,
the tough thing is, we're not, I'm not against the environment. I
mhm.
live in these areas. I want a beautiful, healthy forest. But just as an example, I want to be able to go fish and catch fish, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
Is that
but what
open?
I see in the canyon is we have thousands of acres that were burned to a crisp,
Mhm,
and you drive up there and there's standing dead trees. We were not allowed to log and harvest those trees and replant. They're not even replanting in some of these
mm,
areas.
mm,
It's ridiculous. It makes no sense. Uh, I don't know how it even makes environmental sense. It doesn't. It definitely doesn't make sense for the community that lives there, or an economic sense. Um, it, all these areas now we're having erosion problems.
mm,
So when there's a heavy rain, a lot of that topsoil is now going right into the river instead of being retained. A lot of the what's you see a tree, but the root system
right. It's
is
expansive and yeah.
soaking up that water
Mhm.
and storing it, and that's gone. So
Yeah.
now the
Yeah.
water just runs down the hill.
My favorite hike ever that I've done was Opal Creek in the Opal Creek
Mm-hmm.
Wilderness. And I'm pretty sure, is that in your district or on the edge of it? And I believe that much of that burned. And so what you're saying is they're not going to be replanting that.
A lot of it is not being replanted.
I was gonna say that part alone, like, there's so many people up here every single summer, and it kind of drives me crazy, but you know, because it gets into this bigger climate conversation. But every single summer up here, young people just say, "Oh, it's just going to be even worse and worse every year." But if you pointed that out to people up here, I don't think they would know that
No,
a lot of this is not. They're not allowed to replant.
yeah, I don't think they really understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about the environment, and part of this habitat conservation plan, which was recently passed by the Oregon Department of Forestry, is trying to figure out how to deal with state lands
Mm.
to avoid the lawsuit after lawsuit after
Okay.
lawsuit, which happen for every logging contract. So the typical deal is the state will issue a logging contract for a plot of land, and then a lawsuit's smacked down.
Mm.
And
And those are the environmental
Right.
yes,
Because, like you said, they're
lawyers.
just completely anti-logging, and so when they
they
see
are
that, they go
right, and
jump on it.
it happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So this was an attempt. Well, how can we structure a program to eliminate the lawsuits? So this is kind of a deal worked with attorneys,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't necessarily make environmental sense, or it's not based on science necessarily. But the whole idea is you're going to lock up hundreds of thousands of acres from uh, from harvesting, basically leave it wild, cut off road access to those areas too, and that's a big part of the habitat conservation plan.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole idea is, well, when I read the plan, it was designed to they did modeling, and they say, well, this will provide habitat for the spotted owl. We already talked about that. It's still in decline because it has an apex predator, the barred owl. This marbled murrelet, which is really questionable whether this is going to do anything to increase the marbled murrelet population, which that's another story. And then a tree vole.
Okay.
Okay. Those were the three animals. And then the other thing was this idea, well, we're going to increase carbon storage.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of what you think about carbon in the environment, if your goal is to reduce carbon emissions, the best thing you can do when it comes to your forests is harvest them on a 40 to 50-year rotation.
Because
During those
otherwise, they're
first,
just putting out carbon.
well,
Well, what was the carbon emissions of the fires in
I
2020?
know.
Right. Yeah.
What was the environmental damage
Yeah,
of the fires?
I know.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to have these forests that we're not going to be going in and selectively harvesting. We're not going to be eliminating the fuels. They will, in my opinion, we're going to turn them into tinder boxes, and we're going to continue to have fires.
Yeah.
They're saying, well, this is a carbon storage approach. If you want to store carbon, take a tree, let it grow for 40 to 50 years. Well, that's the fastest it's growing. It's sucking up more carbon in that part of its life than it will in the next 40 to 50 years. Harvest that tree, cut it into lumber, build a carbon sequestration device, a house, which we need more of in Oregon.
Yeah. And everywhere.
And that lumber is storing carbon, and then plant another tree.
And then that
And
money goes back into the
and then the money
community.
goes back into the community. We're building houses. We're storing carbon,
Yeah.
and that's a whole other question. So why I don't understand the logic that says no, the better strategy is to grow trees well over 100 years, which is a goal for a lot of the land as part of this habitat conservation plan.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's a concept I didn't hear about until maybe a year or two ago, but it makes sense. And maybe this is a dumb analogy, but like it's almost like, like I need to mow my lawn right now. But it's like when you walk by like a totally overgrown thing, and eventually the fire department's like, "Hey, you got to do something
Yeah.
about this because this will catch fire and just go out of control." Is that kind of similar to what you're talking about?
Well, yeah.
Like if you don't maintain this stuff in a healthy way, you're gonna have more wildfires and really explosive wildfires that people don't want to see.
We will. That's kind of the natural state. The natural state, I think, is periodically you're going to have ravaging wildfires.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to live through eras of ravaging wildfires. I would rather put the fires out when they start and manage the forest to mitigate the risk of wildfire.
Mm-hmm. And we're just not doing a lot of that
We're not doing that. And
mitigation.
we could actually, it could pay for itself
Yeah.
with proper forest management, active management. We've turned a multi-billion-dollar asset. Oregon has some of the greatest timber production forest lands in the world, the highest producing forest lands in the world. We've turned a multi-billion-dollar asset into a liability. The Habitat Conservation Plan is going to cost the state billions of dollars over the life of this plan. It's taking money away from schools, fire departments, and some counties are getting hit much worse than others.
Mm-hmm.
And by signing this on a 4-3 vote, I think it was, this unelected group of bureaucrats have committed taxpayers to billions of dollars and taken thousands of jobs away. To me, it's outrageous.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking a second ago too when you said modeling about those species.
Yeah.
Whenever I hear modeling now, I'm just like, that is complete bullshit. And that's from a COVID thing. I was talking about this with this doctor that came on the show about COVID modeling, and we now know that a lot of that was just kind of BS.
It was bullshit.
And so I don't know. Just when you said that, I'm
No,
like, I don't trust that
I don't
modeling.
either. I'm a skeptic, and
I mean,
I'm an engineer.
They're models, right?
They're
Yeah,
models,
like you know, as an engineer,
and
like,
there's a lot of variability in the models. And I studied control theory and closed loop systems, and there's so many variables that we're kidding ourselves if we can predict these things.
Yeah, we're never going to be 100% on them.
No,
you know?
and the climate modeling is of the same ilk. You know, we can, if you do believe the models, many of them say it's too late. There's nothing we can do, right? And even if you do believe the models, every thing that Oregon has set out to do with its mandates aren't going to make one bit of difference in the global temperature of the earth.
Yeah.
But it's going to cost, we're paying 15% more on our utility bills. We pay more on our gas.
Yeah,
PGE
just went up. Yeah, it's like close to 20%. It's crazy, but
it's fundamentally anti-human.
Well, and it's interesting because you know, people up here are just crazy about this stuff, and like they're so into it, and they want to do everything they can to protect the climate. But it's like, and I've heard this from a couple smarter people up here, but it's like, listen, all this stuff we're gonna do in Oregon and Portland is never gonna come close to like the emissions from China or all these other countries that we have no control over.
Right.
You know, it's not like a drop in the bucket compared to the rest of the world and what they're doing.
At best, it's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of lose track. You know, every one of these phones,
right, has a
every
carbon
one of
footprint.
these electric cars has a huge carbon footprint.
Yeah.
All the rare earth metals that come out to make these batteries, where do you think that's coming from? What is the environmental cost of that? People don't see it. You know, Oregon is sitting on a bunch of lithium.
Really?
Didn't we sell the rights to that to an Australian mining company?
We may have sold it. Yeah. So I think it's on the Oregon-Nevada border. Most of it may be in Nevada. But we're sitting on a bounty of lithium that we will not touch for environmental reasons. But we have no problem having slave labor.
Right. Anywhere else in the world.
Yeah. With no environmental regards, with no minimum wages. Go after this so we can keep our phones in our cars
and feel better about your electric car.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is simply virtue signaling on Oregonians' part.
Yeah, that's all really interesting stuff. I was trying to think, is there anything else you want to talk about with that stuff?
Well, with the environmental, it kind of ties into it with but if like I would like to speak about the CAFO. I keep missing. I should remember calf, because that just came up with a goat farmer, a small goat farmer, and then the water rights. I think a lot of people who I don't know about, there's not very many people farming in Portland, but outside of Portland, there's a lot of small hobby farms. And CAFO, I think you should explain it.
I'll try and give the lay of the land with this. So, yeah, one thing that makes Oregon special is we value agriculture and small farms. But we sure make it hard to farm in Oregon.
Mm.
So there's a couple things that came up recently. One is related to CAFOs. A CAFO is a confined animal feeding operation.
Okay.
So think of any like a dairy, for example. So you have a large pasture. Your cows are eating the grass. It's milking time. You bring them into a barn with a concrete floor. You go through the milking process.
That's
That
an example of.
that's an example. And so there's environmental rules around that for how you handle waste,
Mm.
drainage, water consumption, all these things, because it is a very densely, there's a lot of animals on a small chunk of land. So Oregon has CAFO rules. What a CAFO is and how that's applied is really done by rule. What I didn't see any. There's a general definition in statute, but what a CAFO is really by rule. So what happened recently is the rule makers decided to apply these CAFO rules to some very small operators. So my understanding is, so if you had a small dairy, maybe you've got a dozen cows and you're bringing them into a building with a concrete floor and you're either feeding them or milking them, you are going to have to demonstrate compliance with water quality rules and things like
Mm.
that. And
There's almost no minimum size to that,
well,
or
I thought there was until I read these articles
yeah.
and started hearing from some small farmers. So, so with the CAFOs, some of these small dairies have filed suit against the state
Mm-hmm.
for applying these rules that will drive them out of business. It's very expensive to comply. That's classic
Like
Oregon,
a couple $100,000 was
That's what I've
what
heard,
I
and
read.
I haven't confirmed that,
Just
but
in
Just
fees and
Well,
stuff,
it's
or how to
fees.
keep
You have to make a
compliance.
plan
Yeah.
for how you're going to deal with all of your waste.
Right.
I have horses on property. I mean, like, it's definitely something that you have to figure out. But when you add the layer of government into it and their requirements, that's where it gets
Mm-hmm.
very expensive.
it's classic Oregon. We regulate things to the hilt, and then at the same time we complain about consolidation and big businesses. Well, we're
Corporate
driving little
farming.
businesses out. They
Right.
can't
Right.
afford this stuff, and the big guys actually kind of like regulation.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
they're in it. Like in your mind, is it like they're going after like the big farm players, but then unknowingly or maybe knowingly knock out all
You
the
are
small, tiny
exactly
ones?
right. So last in the 2023 session, there was a move to block big CAFOs. And in fact, I I call it the chicken wars, the great chicken
Okay.
wars 2023. So
Yes.
where I live, there were 3 chicken CAFOs planned. Each one was about maybe 6 to 8 miles from my house.
Okay.
One to the east of me, one to the
You're
west
like
of me,
right.
and one
You're
to
like
the
right in the
north.
center.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And these are massive operations.
Is
So
it
they're,
just like factory farming? Would you call?
well, they call it factory farming. I went and visited it. It's a farm. It's not a
Yeah.
factory,
Yeah.
but you're talking about maybe 750,000 chickens.
Wow.
And these are fryer chickens. These aren't egg chickens. These
Okay.
in one barn or a series of barns, and where they grow, I can't remember how many days it is, and then they're harvested and they bring them back in. Uh, they're typically under contract with, say, a Foster Farms,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but the farms are owned by the farmers.
Right.
So these are massive operations, and so there was a move to say we don't want those in Oregon. We don't want uh, CAFOs, chicken CAFOs. So there was a move to basically ban any new CAFOs in Oregon and
Mm.
restrict expansion of some existing CAFOs. And there it was defined as what they called large CAFOs.
That's what I was wondering. There was a
Yeah.
size
Well, there was
stipulation.
in this law.
Okay.
And then there was a lot of pushback against that, and it basically got rewritten to where there's restrictions around water quality and things for CAFOs, and then it let the counties decide how far, basically, what's the distance between a CAFO barn and another neighboring structure, or a neighboring home, and let each county by county decide what that
Okay.
distance should be. And but what they did in this process is they opened up this whole CAFO rulemaking process, and they started applying it to some small operations. The same and a lot of the push for this CAFO bill came from small farmers and environmentalists. And I had people on both sides of the aisle in my district, and I told them, you guys are making a deal with the devil here, because you don't know, this is going to come back to bite you.
It's a
and
long
sure
road
enough, it
of
did.
regulation and
Yeah.
all that stuff. And
But what happened with this recently is the Oregon Department of Agriculture started applying these CAFO rules to very small dairies. The dairies sued. Several of us called the Oregon Department of Agriculture, hey, what's going on here? And very shortly after that, they abandoned the process. They said, we're going to step back. We're not going to
after
apply
that
these
pressure,
rules. Yeah. And we're going to revisit it. And that'll give the legislature a chance to look at this again.
That's what I was wondering. Do you think they were trying to, at first I was going to say, were they trying to set an example by doing that? But maybe they were trying to find this line of like, how far is too far with this
Yeah,
stuff? I don't know.
I don't know. I think part of it might have been example setting. Hey, if you're gonna make these guys play by these rules,
create a culture
these
of fear,
very difficult rules, then you're gonna comply with them too. And a lot of the small farmers, it seems like, well, wait, no,
right?
Those shouldn't apply to me. They only should apply to these other guys that
Like,
I
hang
don't
on,
like.
yeah.
So
because that is, yeah. I mean, anyone getting basically a bill of that amount is pretty crazy.
Yeah. And my view on CAFOs is, I know it sounds scary. You've got these big operations. They consume a lot of water. They have waste management issues, but I've toured these facilities. If you're looking at the most efficient use of scarce resources, which is land and water, and the most effective means of managing the waste, it's a CAFO. It really is. It really is.
It's just by design.
By design. It's going to be very efficient in how much water it uses, how much land it uses, and how they manage the waste. It is. The thing is it's concentrated in a small area. And in the case of chickens, they stink. They
and
really
you're in the hub, or we're going to be in the hub of it.
So, and I'm not close enough to
you're like
to
miles.
smell them, but so I went to Malala. I decided I'm going to find out. So I drove down to Malala and I went around an established chicken CAFO, and I just started knocking on doors.
Just asking people.
Yeah, I said, hey, and I measured it on my my Hunt app, so I knew how many yards away it was from the buildings. So I went to a place like 300 yards away. The guy said, I never noticed it. Never doesn't bother me at all. Went to a place 400 yards away. He says, yep, once in a while I notice it, but I live in the country. It's no big deal. It's just how it is. I went to a house 100 yards away. Their front porch was 100 yards from the building. They said that in the summer it's unbearable. It's
really bad.
It's unbearable. In fact, they were preparing the house to be sold.
Wow. Yeah.
They'd inherited it, and in their view, it was unlivable. It made the back patio, which used to be a place where the family used to come and hang out, unbearable. So
it's a real close proximity.
That is a very close proximity. That's 100 yards, and on a hot summer day, when they're churning their manure across the way. And I can see that. So it makes sense to have some distance requirements, and that's sensible to me. But to eliminate them altogether, Oregon's a net importer of chicken.
Yeah. Well, and some of I don't know, just
people like chicken.
Yeah.
So
I always see them because I drive up 205 most weekdays, but I always see those big trucks with a bunch of chickens going up, probably to the slaughterhouse or somewhere. But yeah, I was just thinking all this, what you were talking about, it's just interesting because Oregon, it's almost like they want this kind of ruralness, but at the same time they don't. It's like that's what makes Oregon
Yeah.
Oregon, but at the same time they're kind of fighting against some of that, or or
The
there's a
saying that
fight
I've
against
I've
some of it.
heard, Oregon loves farming, or loves farmers. They hate farming.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you an example. So as these urban areas grow, you'll establish a subdivision right next to an orchard,
Mm.
and they'll charge a premium for the orchard
Mm-hmm.
view homes.
Mhm.
So people move in there. Then they discover, well, this orchard, you know, during cold season, they start these windmills up at any time of day or night to keep the airflow, to keep
Mhm.
the frost away.
Mm-hmm.
The guy's out there with his tractor or generators running. Oh, and then they spray sulfur on the orchard. They don't like any of that,
Yeah, all these guys.
but they
We don't
paid
like this
extra for the
part,
orchard view. So
right?
they
Yeah.
love farmers. They don't like farmers.
Yeah. When I don't know. I was thinking up here, it's almost like Portlanders that love to go like, oh, we'll go to the winery and do all this fun stuff, but then they'll just complain about a lot of the stuff we were just talking about.
Yeah,
It's just,
but that's
it's like you
the
need,
nature of
yeah, it's a
farming.
balance, and I don't
Yeah,
know.
Most people who live further from the land
Mhm.
don't understand how that all of
They're
that
just
makes it to Whole
disconnected.
Foods.
Yeah.
It's there's
Yeah.
I know you like your Whole Foods, your fruit and vegetables, your
Yeah. Where do
chicken.
you think the kale comes from? Come on.
Right.
um, yeah, no, it's all really interesting stuff. I was going to move on to a couple other things
yeah,
here.
sure.
Let me ask you first about this because I told you before, I wanted to ask you about this Tina Kotek stuff because a lot of people are saying this is like Kitzhaber 2. And I really
Yeah.
followed the Kitzhaber stuff. I made a whole sketch about his resignation, about how I think it was his wife or mistress at the time. But I'm just curious, what do you think about the Tina Kotek stuff? And do
Yeah,
you,
what's fascinating to me, I think she really stepped in it.
yeah.
I don't understand the process that she went through. She could have at least checked if there was any, any ethical violations. It sounds like she didn't do that.
She didn't. She
Yeah.
didn't ask anybody.
and
So she just,
and this is still ongoing too. Like there might be more people
yeah,
leaving and stuff. I don't know, but
I don't, and I don't know what transpired. It just sounds like what was going on is it Amy
yeah, actually, I don't
Wilson
even know her
Kotek?
name.
It's
Yeah.
Amy.
So
I don't know.
she was interjecting herself into
Her
decisions, and she
Tina's
was,
spouse. Yeah.
yeah, she
Yeah.
was making people uncomfortable. And so some people left, and then they decided, well, since she wants to do that, she wants to get involved in policy, let's formalize this office
Mm.
and bring staff. I don't know if I'm not aware of any law that she's violating.
Yeah.
I
Well, I
think
know.
she has a budget.
Yeah.
She has a budget she can spend, and I think she has flexibility in how she spends that.
Mhm.
But the optics here really suck.
Yeah, and I'm not saying she's broken the law, but I think a lot of people are already like, should we open this ethics investigation? Because it's just so similar to what
Yeah,
Kitzhaber was doing.
yeah.
I don't think they've opened anything yet, but yeah, it's
No,
just
well, there's been several complaints. Something will
complaints.
be
Yeah,
opened.
okay.
Yes.
It's in the 20s, I think.
I think
That
it was
amount of people.
24 when I
Was it?
last
Yeah,
checked.
yeah.
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 So,
I was just curious about it.
yeah.
And then I wanted to ask you too, because do you have any qualms with the primary system here in Oregon, or do you think it's fine?
We have a closed primary, and I, I kind of have mixed feelings on whether an open primary would be better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it does, our system keeps a lot of people out of the primary process because they're not part of any political party,
Mm.
The NAV voters.
the NAV voters. But also, it takes you 5 minutes to be part of a political party.
Mm.
If you want to participate in a primary, and I know people that do this, they will change their registration so they
To
participate in the
participate,
primary they
yeah.
want, and then when they're done, they go back. They go back to NAV.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I was just curious.
yeah,
About it,
the thing I would say about our system is it generates more polarization than I think there should be.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you had an open primary, you might have more moderate people that are running and winning.
Having a chance or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I was just curious about that. Okay. Answer as much of this you want, because I ask a lot of people this. Do you have any 2024 predictions, election-wise, nationally or locally, or
Oh man.
anything you want to?
Yeah. Nationally, can
It's
we pick none of the above? I mean, you know,
yeah.
I'm I'm I I'm really not a fan of
hmm
of any of the
Round
options that
two
we
of this.
have.
Yeah.
I really I think that the momentum is going with Donald Trump,
Mm.
and I think a lot of it is driven by what's going on our southern border,
Yeah.
which is a complete catastrophe, and it doesn't have to be that way. And I think it's only going to get worse as we learn more about what's happened and what's
It
going
seems
on,
like it. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's gonna I think that's gonna bury Biden.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, it definitely.
Um,
Yeah. A lot of the polls seem to be
yeah,
saying what you're saying. So yeah.
but on a state level, I feel pretty optimistic about Republicans' chances to bring some more
That's
balance to the
that's interesting.
legislature.
Yeah. Because
And
I
but
don't know much about. That's why I'm curious of your
yeah,
take on that.
so on the specifically with the House,
Mhm.
um, we've got a few seats that we need to protect. There are some contested Republican seats that we got to fight to keep. And then there's several other races that are really in swing districts, in
Mm.
purple
Mm.
districts that we can pick up. You know, in the last election 2 years ago, we lost the majority in the House by 12,000 votes.
Mm.
Some of these seats were determined by less than 300 votes.
It's like razor thin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really thin. So that's a matter of voter turnout and getting. This is the other part of the outreach with the GOP groups. A lot of them are really disillusioned.
hmm
And no, this is within our grasp,
It's yeah.
especially when so many people in the middle they've had it. You probably meet them here in Portland.
Yeah.
They've had it.
Yeah.
I've talked to several of them. They voted Democrat their entire life.
Yep.
They're seeing what's going on in their city, and they're finally connecting the dot that this is related to the people I elected.
Right. In a lot of cases
Yeah,
for like 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. And what I was going to show you before is the Oregon voter is here. And what's happened, especially over the last 10 years, is the Democrat leadership, not the regular Democrat voter, but the
Right.
Democrat leadership has
Oh
gone
yeah.
way over here.
Way, way over. Yeah.
And these guys are going, where'd you go?
hmm
What happened?
hmm
You know, I keep voting for you, but you're not representing my interests anymore in that building. And what seems to happen in Oregon is when it swings to a Democrat leadership, it goes hard left
hmm
because too many of them are owned by this extreme progressive wing. And years ago, and I think Governor Kotek was involved in this, there were moderate Democrats in there. They were
hmm
called the Mod Squad. And they would vote to push back on some of this extreme stuff. Well, guess what? They were voted out of
Yeah.
office.
Yeah. I
They
don't
were
think they're there
primaried.
anymore. Right.
They were basically punished
Yeah.
for voting independently, and a lot of those are gone.
Wow.
I want to say something about 2022. The National Congressional
Yeah.
Leadership Fund invested a lot of money in races for the state representatives and state senate, meaning I got paid money to go knock on doors for Republicans. And it was a large company, and I knocked on nearly 10,000 doors. And there were people, I'm not fast. There were people who knocked on a lot more doors, and they were targeting center, um, and over to the right, telling people to vote, talking to people. And so I talked to a lot of people,
hmm
and our voting rolls are not great. So the information we got wasn't very accurate on who these people were. So I actually talked to a lot of people on the left, but the left and the center right, the number one thing that comes up, the number one thing that is beating the Republicans in these races, and I don't know how we fix this other than education, is abortion.
hmm
And it's just literally one word, abortion. It's like they think if they vote for a Republican, that abortion is going to disappear overnight.
Mhm, mhm.
And I started to explain to some of these people after getting permission, abortion is codified into the
Yeah,
Oregon State Constitution through the ninth month of pregnancy. It is not going anywhere.
yeah.
So we need to think about how
Well,
we beat that messaging.
we can't. Um, Here's my take on it, and I posted something on this earlier. We can't just avoid the conversation. We have to confront that head on because it's bullshit.
Hmm.
It's bullshit.
Yeah.
And if that's all you have to run on,
Mhm.
and if voters really will watch if they'd rather see Portland burn to the ground than lose their right to an abortion, I guess you can vote that way. But
Yeah, yeah.
your abortion access is not at risk in Oregon.
Mhm. It's
It's not.
you know,
Even if
when well, I was just gonna mention when we were talking earlier about how local issues are kind of the more important
yeah.
issues, that's this happened maybe a month ago because somebody I work with was saying the same thing. They're like, "Well," I was like, "What's on your mind with this upcoming election?" And she pointed to that. She's like, "Well, I don't know what they're doing with abortion." And I told her,
So
"Listen, you need to start looking at local issues because that
yeah.
is not at stake at all. There's nothing that's not going anywhere in Washington, Oregon, California,
So
and I
I
don't know."
yeah, I'd love to talk about that. Here's my take on it because I am someone who's pro-life.
Mhm, mhm.
Also pro life.
Yeah. And uh, the way I look at it is pretty straightforward. Um, it's a human life
Mhm.
from conception. That's biology, science. If it's not human, I don't know what it
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
And it's that life is solely dependent on its mother for survival. So the question is for us as a society is um, do we have a moral obligation to protect that life or not? I know that a lot of people disagree with me on that. It's a very divided issue. In fact, it's not even settled within the Republican circles if you look at polling.
Mhm,
Mhm.
mhm.
So I really have to respect that. So it would be a grave mistake to force a law on a society that they don't agree with.
Mhm.
I That would be a terrible thing to do. The law would be in place for 10 minutes and Republicans would be in charge for about the same amount of time. so
Yeah, yeah.
so that doesn't make sense. So what I that's how I see it. And that's the situation in Oregon.
Yeah. And
So
I only pointed out because it's like being up here for like 20 years, they're the left is scraping the bottom of the barrel when they just turn to this issue. And that's why I
well,
try to quell their like, listen,
yeah,
this isn't even an argument because you have everything you want on the West Coast. And
and
can we
the
talk
fact
about
that
the real
yeah,
problems we're
the
having in
fact
Yeah.
that
Oregon? Like,
people they see everything going on around them,
hmm
and that's their issue.
That
right.
is their
That
issue.
tells you that the messaging works.
Yes.
Yeah.
I saw
And that's the
some
unfortunate part is it does work, but yeah,
yeah.
that's what I'm trying to change is like,
No,
listen,
I'm trying to change that too,
yeah,
and
yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to confront it head on and say
yeah.
this is
No,
BS.
I agree with you. And
And
if
you're
like,
gonna, I know they're gonna be hammering on this issue
They've
until
already
yeah,
started.
November.
up
They
until
are,
November, it's going to go like this.
and
Yeah.
I'm gonna be calling it out every
Yeah.
time I hear it because it's garbage. That's not the issue that voters should be
It's
focused
not.
on
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
their access is not at risk in Oregon,
Hmm. Yeah.
and in part because that's not where the hearts and minds of people. There's a lot of people that do want access to it, and if we can find some common ground there,
Yeah.
then that may make sense for legislation, but it would be a grave mistake to do
That's what
anything
I was. I
otherwise.
do agree with you, and like we need to be able to talk about it. Like that's one thing that just drives me crazy up here
Yeah,
is that like conversations about any topic just get shut down because people
yeah.
disagree, and it's like when you actually talk to people, it's not that hard. Like
No,
people,
it's not.
there's a lot of common ground, and
But what I saw on this topic, for example, my congresswoman is Lori Chavez DeRemer,
Mm,
yeah,
and as far as Republicans go, she's a pretty
mm.
moderate
yeah,
Republican, and
yeah,
she is in a swing district, so she is respectful of that. Um, but Representative and congressional candidate Janelle Bynum, I saw her post something where she said called out Lori as a mega extremist
Right.
who can't wait to take your abortion rights away. That's with all due respect,
Yeah.
Janelle, that's complete crap.
Yeah.
That is not true at all.
She knows that.
And she does know that.
Hmm.
And that's not true at all with Lori.
It's just not even
It's just
substantive debate. That's what
no,
drives
it's
me
not.
crazy. Is it's like you're just taking something from way over here and just slinging it, and
Yeah,
it has nothing to do with.
but it's the only thing they have.
Yeah.
They can't run on
How good, how
livability
great
in the
Portland's doing.
state
Yeah.
That should be. It's the only
or
thing you have.
community.
Yeah.
That's all they have to run on. So they're
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
scare. They're going to try and scare their base from voting for Republicans, and I think part of our job is to call it out
Hmm.
and not run away from the topic, but
Mhm.
call it out for what it
Yeah.
is, which
And
is a load of crap.
you probably know this too, but I say this all the time on the show, and like part of what I try to do is just make the R word, Republicans, not a bad word in Oregon,
Right.
because like I said, we had Tom McCall, who was one of the greatest governors the state's had in my knowledge of it.
Yeah.
But there's a balance I think that Oregon used to have of working with everybody, regardless of party,
Yeah.
and we don't really have that anymore.
And I really want to see an Oregon that works for everybody.
Hmm.
And
Mhm.
if you focus on the issues that really matter to people, they want, they want a good job. They don't want to be taxed to death. They want to know that when they are taxed, that it's being used and
Mhm.
it's showing measurable results. They want to be able to take their kid to a school, know that there's order in the school, and that their kids are learning
Yeah.
stuff.
Oh my God. Yeah. Our
Yeah.
public schools right now are just people are just
They're a
at least
mess.
up here they're just
Yeah.
fleeing.
Oh, they are.
Um,
They want to be able to walk down the street and not step in human excrement and not
Mhm.
have to deal with somebody who's high.
Yeah.
It's just really basic stuff that
Mhm.
people want, and that's what we're talking about in this cycle is let's get back to basics
Totally. Yeah.
of good governance, and focus on the issues that are important to everyday Oregonians. And the policies we've been dealing with for the last 10 years and longer have led us to this place. People have to be willing to change how they vote if they want to see change.
Yeah.
So
I think that's
yeah.
true. Yeah. All right. We get into these last. This will be fun. I want to tell me any more you want to about your Northwest story. You said you moved here in '89 or something, or
Yeah, I did. I grew up in western Montana
okay.
on a cattle ranch.
And how did
Nice.
Oregon
And
kind of get on your radar? You were just like,
well, my
you like,
wife was from Scio.
oh, okay,
Aw.
wow,
Jamie grew up in Scio. And so when we graduated from college, so I was down in California, in the Bay Area, great place to go to school. I had no desire to live there. So we looked in the West, in the Northwest. So I looked in Montana, Idaho, Washington, and Oregon.
Mhm.
And with the techie stuff in the late 80s,
Mhm.
there really wasn't much going on in Montana and
Yeah.
Idaho. Um, I had several job offers in Washington and Oregon, but I settled on working for a small company in Eugene that did automation in the wood products industry.
Mm.
So, it was definitely attractive because my wife, grew up in Oregon. So that's how we got here. And I
Yeah.
love Oregon because, in part, because I could do the techie stuff I love, but live in an area that is gorgeous
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
gives me access to the ocean and the mountains and outdoor stuff. So it's really, for me, it was this combination, the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Well,
And to be close to her family. She has an awesome
yeah.
family. So
I was thinking, because didn't you just go to Montana like
I
months
did.
back?
Yes.
Because I always
I loved
see,
it.
I could be totally wrong about this because I've never been to Montana, but I want to go because to me, I see like weird parallels with Oregon. So it's kind of purple sometimes over there.
yeah,
But I don't know. Maybe that's not true.
I love Montana. I go back every summer.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I have a lot of family up there. But definitely more conservative, but it's changing all the time as the cities. Missoula, for example, is a very liberal city, kind of like a Eugene. I've always thought of Missoula and Eugene as similar. They're both liberal arts college towns. So there's a lot of pressure
And one of the reasons I always think of that is because I believe weed is legal there, right? Is that?
I think it
It is. I think.
is it now?
I think
For
'Cause that's
medical
just-
use, I think.
yes.
Is it okay?
I think it's
I
just
mean,
medical
I
use.
saw usage there, so
Yeah.
I
That's why I said it was like
Yeah,
purple
yeah.
because
assumed it was legal.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna go through these goofy questions. You can answer them because I don't think I've asked you any of these.
Okay.
Let's say you just parked in here this morning, but let's say you're parking on a normal painted line spot. You pull in or do you back in? Normally,
Odds are I'm going to go directly in.
straight in.
Yeah,
Okay.
straight
What about
in.
you?
I'm back in. I'm one
You
of
back
your
in.
rare,
Okay.
exceedingly amazing parallel parkers.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I've been doing it more recently, and it sometimes it just feels good to you just nail it, and then you can pull out when you're gone, and I don't know, but most people do just pull in, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Have I asked you the peanut butter thing?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Are you smudgy, crunchy, or smooth peanut butter?
Oh.
I am whatever peanut butter my wife buys.
Okay. You don't have control over.
No, which odds are it's creamy.
Okay. And how about stir, no stir? Do you like?
Odds are no stir.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about you?
Creamy and stir.
Oh, you like the stir?
Yes, I do.
I don't like the oil. I just can't get past the oil. I don't know what it is, but
It's in there. I'm telling you, even if you don't see it, it's
I know,
there.
I know. And people complain about palm oil all the time, and I'm just like, I don't care. I'm not stirring my damn peanut butter. Okay. Okay. Which fruit do you think you could throw the farthest?
I would say an apple, probably.
Okay. I've heard apple.
It's
like that one.
palm size. It's firm. Yeah, I would say an
Okay.
apple.
What about you?
I was gonna say orange because it's got a little grip on it.
Apple and orange. Those
Yeah,
are like the
orange,
two common
orange would
ones.
be good, but it's a little squishy.
It's true.
Yeah.
You gotta get a real
Yeah.
good orange.
Yeah.
And what blew my mind, because those two always come up, and I have to research this more, but like if you line them up apple orange, I believe the apple weighs more, which I didn't think would be the case.
I
But
think it probably does.
because I thought all the water in the orange would help. But anyway, I always tell people banana. People think I'm crazy.
Like a
Banana,
boomerang.
Banana, like a boomerang.
Yeah. Just keeps going. Do you have a favorite type of French fry? Do you like curly fry, straight fry, waffle fry, tater tots?
I love tater tots, but probably my favorite fry is fresh cut. Soak them in water for a while.
Mm.
Get a little oil and salt on them and put them in.
You're saying like make them yourself?
Yeah, that's my.
That's cool.
That's my preferred.
Nobody's ever answered that way.
I like that.
How about you?
I love to make my own fries,
Mhm.
but seasoned waffle fries.
Mm.
Oh,
I just had those at
Seasoned,
dinner.
yeah.
I had those at dinner last
Nobody's
night.
mentioned the seasoned. Sometimes I'll get the Cajun fries from like Five Guys or like those other places. but
Yum.
Cajun fries are good. Sometimes it's too much seasoning, but how about either of you do you keep your butter in the fridge or out?
Always out.
Out, yeah.
what?
Because I bake a lot. I mean, I don't keep all of it out. Some of it's hard, but I bake a lot
Okay.
and it needs to be soft.
Yeah, ours in the fridge.
Okay. Each one. I'll ask both of you this: if you could pick a gigantic brand to run, if you had to pick, if you were forced,
Forced to pick a brand.
yeah, just anything like Nike or Intel or whatever. What would you? Or maybe
Oh boy.
Boeing or SpaceX. I guess Boeing right
Yeah.
now is probably not a.
No,
With
maybe
all
I
the-
could help turn Boeing around.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad. I love that company.
Yeah, I mean they've
they've,
done
they always
tremendous work.
treated me well, and
Yeah.
they were always known for quality.
hmm
And I think they've had some setbacks, but I think they can bring that back.
hmm
I was impressed with everybody I met there. So, but it's been a few years since I worked.
Is
with
it?
them,
Yeah.
so.
Is that what you would pick?
Yeah.
Boeing?
Well, I would think, I don't know. I might pick. I'd take Elon Musk's empire.
Just
X,
all of that. Okay.
Tesla, SpaceX.
Yeah.
Well, that's
The whole
pretty
thing
cool.
is neural deal. Yeah, sure. Why
Okay.
not?
Okay. And what about you? Do you have one?
ZZ Wranglers.
Oh,
Wranglers?
nice. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, no. I changed my mind. Lucchese.
Okay. I don't even know. Is that a different one?
That's like the high end cowboy boots.
Okay.
They're
Oh,
super
boots.
nice. Yeah.
Oh.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lucchese.
Okay. Very cool. All right. That's the end of my questions. You guys have anything else you want to bring up before we wrap it up here?
No, thanks for the opportunity.
I'm
Yeah.
just so
Yeah.
Well,
glad
what about
that you were elected. I'll say
yeah,
that.
and like for this year's election, can people? Where do you want people to go to your
Yeah. So
website or?
you can go to my website, eddiehl.com, EDDIEHL.com,
Okay.
and you can sign up for my newsletter. If you want to donate, you
Yeah,
can
can you donate
donate
on there?
there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's a donate button. And also all the links to my social media. And I try and stay active on that. Part of what I enjoy about this job is the engagement and interaction
Yeah.
with just regular people. So I do a lot of I try and do a lot of events. I like brew pubs,
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
and
nice.
yeah, people like to come to brew pubs, and I field any question that's tossed out at me. If people want to talk to me, meet for coffee or whatever, I'm always open to that. And that's something I learned when I get, again, this whole thing is new to me. I just feel like I'm a regular guy that just felt compelled to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you get in that building, and the priorities in that building are not necessarily the priorities of the people you're dealing with.
It's like a different world
It's a
sometimes.
different world.
Yeah.
Sometimes they are, but in a lot of cases, they're not. They're directed by special interest groups. And um, I think too many people in elected office get disconnected from the reasons they went there in the first place, or the people they're representing. And I
Mhm.
don't want that to happen to me. So I keep in those connections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you seem like a regular normal guy to me, so.
Good.
Right?
You haven't been tainted by the politician world.
Yeah, no. I just want to be myself. And if that means I get unelected, so be it. I was actually pretty happy not being elected.
Yeah.
I'm fine. I'll go back to sitting on an island somewhere sipping a Mai Tai. That'd be
Yeah.
just fine.
All right, yeah.
But I feel I've got the energy, and I've got some good ideas.
Mhm.
I love systems. Um, I think I can help, and I love this state,
Yeah.
and so, and I don't like the direction it's going. So if I can help turn that ship around, and I like a fight, I'm going to keep at it.
Nice.
So
Well, yeah. Yeah, go check out his website and donate if you want. Yeah, and thank you both for coming out today. Yeah.
you bet.
Thank you.
Thank you.